So here's my latest arcade machine modding project, which you can tell is actually not really an arcade. It's actually some legit Vegas slot machines. These are some of the older 5-reel, 9-liner type IGT slot machines. I found a guy on OfferUp that was selling these for next to nothing. They were basically 25 bucks each. I just wanted them for the chassis. I didn't care if they worked or not because I wanted to replace everything. And there are some slot machine casino type games in MAME. And while they were not working in MAME for a while, with the current version of MAME, which is 2.6 or higher, a lot of these are now working again. These are going to be some of your older slot machine games. A lot of the video poker, video slots from IGT will work. There's a lot of the kind of bootleg 8-liner slot machines that you might see in a gas station or a bar are in there and work. There's a few blackjack games, and there's some like trivia games as well. Those work with buttons, do not require touchscreen, which is good for the readily available materials that I had. And so that's what I'm using. So obviously I'm not going to be able to put in that typical 5-reel IGT slot machine that matches the graphics on these two machines, but I can put in some legit slot machines and video poker games that can run on these machines and look more legit than it would be in an arcade cabinet. So just to kind of show you what it looks like to start with, here's your CRT that actually pulls out pretty easily. You just reach right here and pull. You can almost do it one-handed, but it actually just pops out pretty easily, slides right out. You don't have to use screws, you don't have to mess with these screws or pull any wires out. You can just gently pull on it and it'll come right out. And here's what it looks like when it comes out. Be careful, it might have some charged power in the capacitors. There is a shock danger there if they've been sitting idle for years. Most likely not, but still use some caution. And this is where all the button wires are. It's quite dense in here with wires. Wires going everywhere, which makes it really hard to reach in here to take the buttons out. But that's what you have to do. This particular machine has a coin acceptor on it. Maybe I'll tinker with that, see if I can get that to work for a credit. Not sure. There's no hopper in here to hold the coins anyway. These are just some incandescent light bulbs. You just twist and they pop out. Well, actually this one's got some LEDs on it. That's a more modern one. What I'm doing is I'm removing as much as I can that I don't need to remove weight and excess clutter in the machine, and then just replacing it with new guts. So here you can see a work in progress of a machine that's working. And I'll try to be careful here as I open it. You can see there's not much in here now. There's a Raspberry Pi 3B, I believe. Not the 3B Plus even, it's just Raspberry Pi 3B. A temporary speaker in there for sound. Here you can see there's a 17-inch Dell LCD that is just kind of zip tied in here, which actually holds it in fine. It just doesn't hold it in place very still. It moves around, so I'm gonna try to improve that. Down below you can see the USB encoder, the wires going into it. It looks like a lot of wires, but believe me, it is far less wires than it used to be. And here you can see how I replaced those light bulbs with an LED strip, just ran it through there. And it lights up. This machine accepts bezel on the side. Makes it look a bit more legit. And also I'm running those light strips down the bottom where there would normally be a fluorescent bulb, and that lights it up. This particular LED strip plugs in by USB, so it actually powers on and off with the Pi. So that's what it looks like at this moment. Here you can see the pile of guts that I have ripped out of this machine already. Here's a lot of the spaghetti mess of, well, I shouldn't say spaghetti because it's zip tied and organized quite nicely, but just a massive amount of wires. I just cut these off and took them out, got them out of the way. There's a couple more spots where there's some of the wires from the original machine and some circuit boards are still in here that I can potentially spend some time on to unclip, unscrew, and remove. Some more of these wires here, as well as some more wires up here and more circuit boards that I'm not going to be using. So I can strip a little bit more out of here still. This is functional. I have a 1 button that I can use to get out, and I'm in emulation station running in main. All the Player's Edge Plus ROMs are IGT slot machines. There's a ton of them that run in main, especially the video poker ones. I'm only using the ones that have the pay tables on the top and are multi-game ROMs. I prefer those. They're much nicer. There are a bunch of ROMs that do work that do not show the pay tables, which are annoying, so then you don't know what you're winning. But I can just launch it. And it'll come up. Some of these machines will do these tests when they start up, some will not. Okay, we're back in the game. Now you can see this says menu, and this is a multi-poker game ROM, so I can press my 5th hold button. That brings up the list of the games that are on this particular ROM. So you have different versions of poker, jacks are better, joker poker, bonus poker, super double bonus, double bonus plus, and all they do is they change the pay tables. Usually they add bigger payouts for the more difficult winning hands, and the smaller winning hands such as full house, flush, and straight, you get less winnings on those. So different games you can play within this one particular ROM. You can see how I've laid out my buttons here. I laid out these with all the 5 hold buttons for poker games. You can see almost all these buttons I have a secondary function, and what we have right here is cursor navigation. So I got up, down, left, right. So here within emulation station, I can go up and down with those buttons. That's an example of one of those 8-liner games. This is the deal, start and spin button, max bet. I did put a menu button label on this because the multi-poker games use that to switch games. There are some buttons I put on here for blackjack, so we got a split that I just stuck here because I didn't have anywhere else to put it. Most of these buttons here are for the 8-liner games. Most of them have a bet button, and they have a double up button or a take button, and then they have the small or big on the double up function. I've added blackjack functions as secondary functions for these. So we got stand, surrender, insurance, and hit. This is my credit button, so when I hit this, it's like I'm entering coins. And this is a pretty good layout for most of these ROMs. I spent a lot of time going through the ROMs, finding ones that run well and that are worth playing. There's a few more that you could use. There's definitely a lot more Player Edge Plus games, but there's a lot of the same poker games over and over again. I did add a lot of these Igt Video Slots that mimic a lot of the actual real slots, like Haywire and Double Diamond and things like that. In fact, I could start one of those. So it says it's got 2 coins in already, so no, okay. Coin, spin. Hey, I won. Almost had 3 wilds. Can hit the change button, go back out, change games. There's a lot of these, well, there are a few 5-reel 9-liner type games, but they're not the IGDT ones. They're this company called Igrosoft. I think it's either like German or Russian or something like that. They play somewhat similar as far as the pay lines go as the IGT 5-reels, but then they work like the typical 8-reel machines where every time you win something small, and then you have to, well, you get the option to double up and then pick a card to try to win a bigger prize, which basically motivates you to risk all your winnings every time. So here's one of those 8-liners, what those look like. Some more IGT slots. Another 8-liner, another Igrosoft 5-reel. This is the IGT Blackjack. I don't recall ever seeing this in a actual casino, but it's a nice blackjack game. It looks a lot like the video poker game. I think I have a few other blackjack games on there, but I like this one the best. And all these games, like I said, will run on a Raspberry Pi. You don't need a high-powered machine to run them. I actually just used a Raspberry Pi I already had laying around that I wasn't using for anything, and an SD card I had laying around. I had an extra USB encoder. So I put this together for next to nothing, really. I paid, like I said, 25 bucks for the actual chassis. I've got the Dell 17-inch 4x3 monitor from a guy off Facebook Marketplace for 20 bucks, I think. And then I bought a couple LED light strips. So I got one on the bottom, I'm gonna put one in the top. Each of those I got for 15 bucks. So now I did already have some of those parts, so it makes maybe a little bit cheating, but I'm pretty much gonna end up with 100 bucks or less invested in this, and I'm gonna have a cool looking slot machine game that I can add to my game room. And I have a second one I can build. So I had bought some new buttons to use, but they were bigger than the buttons that were in these slot machines, and they don't quite fit in the holes. So instead, I'm just going to show you how to reuse these existing buttons and put in your own labels. To remove these buttons, you're going to have to reach up with your fingers. It's really tight, and you've got to rotate to the left, lefty-loosey on this plastic nut. It's going to be like this. It's going to be really difficult to do. You just have to be persistent with it. Nudge it a little bit, maybe get a pair of pliers, try to squeeze it and rotate it. Maybe blow a hairdryer or a heat gun on these to give them some heat and make them expand a little bit. It took quite a bit of work to remove the 2 buttons I've already removed from this machine. So you just have to be persistent. And once you get one out, it's usually a lot easier to get the next ones out because you have more room to work and you can get rid of some of these wires that are in your way. It's a lot easier to reach. But you'll twist the bottom and these 2 things will fall off. Once it's loose enough, they'll stay on the wire though. And then you lift the button up from the top and then you can pry apart the button and then you can remove it. Be careful when you're working in here. There's a lot of sharp edges, pieces of metal, points. These wires that come off of the button for ground, the ground connection is pretty pointy. So just be careful. Maybe wear some gloves if you have some thin gloves that can not restrict your movement. I did scratch myself a couple times working on this, and you probably will too. So just be careful. There's a lot of, like I said, sharp exposed edges of metal in here. When you remove a button, this is what it looks like. Now, when you are pulling the wires off of the button switch itself, you want to be careful because you can break it by pulling off the actual switch. I had done that already on this one. There's 2 plastic notches that hold the actual micro switch into the button, and I broke this particular one because I pulled too hard, so it doesn't sit in place and it'll pop off. So just be careful of that when you're pulling off the wires. They may be a bit stuck on there. You might have to use a pair of pliers to help you pull them off. Just try to maybe hold a finger on the micro switch as you're pulling so that it doesn't pull the switch out of the button itself. Now, once you have this button, you probably are going to want to take it apart to, for one, clean it, because if you're using an old slot machine like I am, a lot of the buttons are really grungy, have a lot of perhaps cigarette residue in them. So I like to use a Clorox wipe and clean them off. And I also want to replace the text in the buttons, so I can show you how to do that. This one I've already loosened up, but basically you're going to want to pry out the white portion of the button from the top part, and that will contain the light, which I believe these are 12-volt lights. I haven't yet had success with lighting the buttons. They, in theory, could work if you have a 12-volt power source connected to them. I believe this pin here is the ground, and the next 2 pins are power, for positive and negative for power, and these last 2 pins over here are where you're going to connect your button wires for into your USB encoder board to register the button. So that's just the button mechanism. Now, to get the top part of the button out, you just kind of squeeze these white tabs here and push it through. There's a spring in there as well, so just be careful you don't lose that. All right, this is what it looks like once you remove the white plastic out of the button. Now you just have this black button shell, and you have the top part of the button, and you can pop off the top part of the button like I just did, and everything flew everywhere. It may be stuck with grime, so you might have to pry it off with a fingernail or a screwdriver. Just be careful, because a lot of these buttons can get very brittle with this plastic, and you can see I just cracked this one. Many of these I found kind of disintegrated when I pulled them apart. Here's an example of another one that I had pulled apart previously where it's cracked. Here you can see the actual label is just a clear piece of plastic with some printing on it. So if you want to change the label, I like to use some Avery clear labels on my inkjet printer, print out a button with the text that I want on it, and then just put it back together. You're just going to set it on top of the flat part of this button, which will sit directly on top of here, and you'll just reverse what you did to take it apart to put it all back together, and it all snap together. Just push that on, it'll snap. And then when you line it up, you want to look for the two that are closer together. Find the two notches that are closer together, and that tells you where it's got to go. And you'll line it up and shove it back in there. And once it's back in, just double check that you can push on the button. It makes a little bit of a click sound. Feels good and not too stiff. If it's too stiff, you might want to pop it back out, put it back in, maybe try to clean some of the residue and then put it back together. And then likewise, you want to look for those two notches that are closer together when you put the bottom part of the button in. So those will line up like this. And to put this together solidly, I like to use a pair of pliers and or a wrench, I should say, and squeeze the top white part of the button with the bottom, with the top portion, and just pinch those together until it snaps. So the emulator you're going to need for most of these casino ROMs is LR MAME. So go into RetroPie setup, go down into manage packages. It's an experimental package, so go down to experimental. And the one I'm talking about is not actually 125 MAME, it's actually down further, LR-MAME. This is the one you want, 241. The other one's not going to perform as well. This one performs well and works with all the buttons, so this is the one you want. Install it, and then when you're done, it's back out. And when you select a ROM, hit A when it's launching to bring you up to this menu, and then you're going to want to select your default emulator for your main games, and you want to select that emulator, or if you want to set it per ROM, you can do it with the second option there. So for most of the IGT video poker or video slot machines, the first time you start it up, it's going to say call attendant. You're going to have this blinking thing at the top, and you're going to need to initiate things before you can play. So have your keyboard plugged in, and the default keys you're going to need is press O, which is going to open the virtual door here. You can see now it says door open and CMOS data. So try just hitting K. If that doesn't work, you want to hold it till it beeps, and that means it's good. And then close the door by pushing O again, reopen the door, push L, and then it'll say EEPROM data, press K. Some of the machines will do this testing cycle after this, some of them will not. It thinks the virtual door is still open at this point, so once it gets done with this, we'll have to close the door. See, it says door open, press O again. And now we're at the point where we can play. If you need to configure some buttons, press tab, or keys, press tab. I already have my hold buttons defined. Max bet I need to set. Deal. Coin in's already set. I think that's all I need. Play credit, I'll do that one. And now we can go to the video options and get rid of these virtual buttons on the screen. by selecting Screen 0 Standard. All right, now we can play. So a lot of these ROMs are going to be these bootleg 8-liner type of casino games. And these are games that you find in not so legal bars and gas stations sometimes, especially here in Texas. And the way they work is anytime they win, they'll ask you if you want to double up, and then you'll get a game to try to double your winnings, which makes you want to gamble away all your winnings. This particular ROM is really interesting because it has a switch that switches it on the fly to Pac-Man. And then we have a really cheesy bootleg version of Ms. Pac-Man that you can play. It's really pretty funny. The controls are weird because, hey, this is a casino slot machine, not really Pac-Man. And then when your cops are gone, hit the button and you get back to playing some more 8-liner games. At least I assume that's what it's for. Why else would you do that? You're about to get busted for your illegal slot machine. Here come the cops. Oh, we're not gambling. We're playing Pac-Man on this machine. Okay, they're gone. Here's another Cherry Master 8-liner game with another hidden game in it. Oh, here's an example of what happens when you win. You can double up or you can take score. So if I double up, it's then going to ask me to guess if my next card is going to be large or small. And it's just, some of these are a little bit better odds than others. Some are just totally random. You can't tell if you're going to win or lose based on what is showing. Sometimes they'll show you a card and you just had to be higher or lower in that card, which is a little bit easier. But this one also has that other game on it. So, well, let's play some Tetris. And which button to start? I don't remember. Here we go. And a really bootleg looking version of Tetris. It's got some weird parts. It's got some like U-shaped parts. Doesn't seem to have a button to make it jump down to the bottom. I finally got a line. Oh, here comes one of those U-shapes. Look at that. You'll never see a Tetris anywhere else that has one of these. At least none that I've seen. Anyway, oh, back to the gambling. So there's a lot of these Cherry Master Fruit Bonus variety of slot machine games on here. Since this is running RetroPie and MAME, we can run some actual arcade ROMs on it too. As long as you can manage to control it with these kinds of buttons, you can play it. It's probably not an ideal experience, but you can just because you can. So to remove this glass and work in the inside of here, you just gotta, if you got a ticket reader here, you just gotta pull on it and it'll slide out. And this usually would be some metal here, but it's just a facade, and the glass is just resting in here. So you can just actually just lift it up and it'll lift it out of the notches, and then you can grab it and lift it out. And this is what the inside of the top glass area looks like now. I removed most of the wiring and the boards that are inside here. I have a little amp now, and I have that connected to the built-in speakers. Just cut the wire and connected it to the amp for all these. There's 3 speakers in this one. So this back one's kind of like the bass subwoofer, and then these ones on the side are more like the tweeters. There was a circular fluorescent bulb in here that I just removed, and then I stuck LED strips in here that provide enough lighting to light up the glass. And that's all that's going on in here. Here it is, all working and lit up. We got LED lights on the top and bottom glass, as well as the side. The monitor is all mounted and aligned, and we're good to go. We've got sound hooked up through these side speakers as well. And it's working. These poker games have multiple poker games you can select. But we also have about 100 other casino games, slot machine games, poker games, blackjack games, all running on MABE.